Hello again, Michael Ware. We're doing another candidate file. These are very popular. It gives us an opportunity to visit with the elected officials or to be elected officials and talk about the basis of the Second Amendment. We have Helena Hayes here from District 88 running for Iowa House again. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for being here. So I want to share this screen. I'm going to do that right now. And these are our 4 candidate questions that we're going over. So these are our top legislative priorities, and you're in a position to help with us all. I'll provide the context, ask the 4 questions. We'll go through that real quick. And then I'd like to turn the stage over to you, Representative Hayes, Helena Hayes in District 88, so you can visit with us a little bit about the Second Amendment and yourself. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. First question, here's the context. History has shown that making a rule or posting a sign declaring a place a no-gun zone, such as a school, does nothing to protect the people gathered there. In fact, there is irrefutable evidence that some of the worst mass murderers specifically chose those sites to avoid armed resistance. Federal law and some states' law allow a person with a valid permit to carry a firearm in schools and on school property. The question is this: would you support changing Iowa code to support a permit to carry being sufficient for any school?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Michael, we've tried to do that in the last 4 years that I've been in legislation or in the legislature. And I would support that change because I think 2 things are important to point out in this particular question. And the first thing is that when you already have established a permit to carry, you already meet certain legal standards that are established by the state, a lawful legal standard to carry. And so when you have, say, you have this lawful legal standard to carry, and then you have the language of, but just not here and not here and here and here and here, you have an inconsistency with the law and how it's being applied and how it's being interpreted. And so that would be one factor I would consider in this. And the second thing is, again, you have law-abiding citizens that have a permit to carry. They've already been granted that right. They're willing to comply with law. It is the people that have a criminal intent that we should be worried about. Those that are not going to follow, say, a posted information or a restriction in law, because the intent is what is behind the particular question in here. And so I fully would support this particular question that you've asked and allow valid permit holders to carry across all locations in the state of Iowa.
Fantastic. Thank you. The second question. Here's the context. When an employer bans the possession of a firearm or ammunition in a private vehicle on employer property, employees must face a choice of risking dismissal by ignoring the rule or being disarmed from the time they leave the home until the time they return, no matter how long their commute or how many places they may need to visit. IFC believes that the proper place to draw the line between the rights of employers and the rights included in the expectation of privacy and the right to armed self-defense is at the locked door of a private vehicle. The laws of at least 26 other states agree. The question is this: will you support legislation that protects, Yes, I'm sorry, I got off a little bit. Will you protect legislation? I've got to start again for the 3rd time. Oh, thank you for holding in there. I'm going to be able to get this out. Sorry about that. Will you support legislation to protect Iowans from the de facto ban on private and public employer parking lots?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the 4 years that I've been in the legislature, I have already supported those things. But I think that bill has come up every single year. We call it the parking lot ban. And so the 2 things that collide in this particular question are your Second Amendment rights to constitutional carry, right? Your ability to defend yourself clashes with the say private property rights and workplace safety. Those 2 come together right here. And so the language that we have discussed in our legislation that since the time I've been there has been about the ability for, say, an employee to keep the firearm in their vehicle, in a locked vehicle, and in the glove compartment and are in a safe place, so that you honor their right to carry and their self-defense while also maintaining that workplace safety. So 100%, I wish we could have got this across the finish line in the legislature, but we've been able to get it out of the House multiple years in a row, but it has not made it through the Senate or to the governor's office, and it should. We definitely want to support this because, again, your Second Amendment rights extend also into your workplace safety and the places that you go to and from work. And so how can you do that when you have this, again, incongruent ability to carry across the state? So 100% support it.
Great, thank you. Context for a third question. Since 1934, federal law is highly regulated but does not prohibit the private ownership of machine guns, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, shotguns, destructive devices, explosives, etc. Iowa law terms these offensive weapons. Since 2016 and 2017, Iowa has allowed for the private ownership and use of suppressors, short-barrel rifles, shotguns, etc. The repeal of the state's earlier prohibition has not resulted in any apparent problems. Iowa is one of only 14 states that ban the private possession of machine guns, even when in full compliance with federal law. Nationwide, crime committed with lawfully possessed machine guns has been almost non-existent. IFC believes Iowa's ban on offensive weapons is redundant and unnecessary. The question is this: will you support removing 724.1 and related statutes from Iowa Code?
Yes, so 724.1 is the offensive weapon chapter in statutory code. And if a person were to dig into that, they'll see that there are actually 6 different definitions. And some of them are fairly straightforward and the others are kind of broad. The question I think that is baked in this particular instance is, do you criminalize ownership or do you criminalize behavior? And again, you're back to what is the intent? And we know in a court of law, and we know attorneys and judges, they always take into consideration what is the intent. So the answer to that is yes, I would consider removing or much more amending that particular chapter, because it's a slippery expansion of our constitutional rights. And in our particular case, you mentioned the first one, which is machine guns, is the very first one listed in that. And so a couple of the others are a bit vague definitions. And you, depending on the political winds at the time, you're going to add and subtract to that in such a ways that I think you create some potentially dangerous opportunities for our Second Amendment rights to be violated. So I would definitely support further restricting that kind of chapter.
Okay, thank you. All right, here's our fourth and final question. The Iowa Firearms Coalition advocates for the creation of a specialty Gadsden flag license plate in Iowa, symbolizing Second Amendment rights and the opposition to government overreach. The plate is intended to be a voluntary funding mechanism for two-way educational programs through an additional fee. Despite passing the Iowa House with bipartisan support 2 years consecutively, the measure failed in the Senate, prompting IFC to urge Iowans to contact their legislators in support of the plate, which they see as a reflection of the will of the people, especially following the passage of the state's Freedom Amendment. The historical "Don't Tread on Me" motto of the Gadsden flag is highlighted as a powerful statement against government intrusion. The question is this: will you support the Gadsden plate legislation that directly directs voluntary funding to two-way education, safety, and training?
Yes, 100%. So that was legislation in 2024 and 2025. And what it would do is put a fee of $50 on that plate. I remember in 2024, oh my goodness, the Democrats did a whole bunch of amendments to that bill on the floor. And they essentially just kind of struck out, the Gadsden part and plugged in whatever they wanted, endangered species or all kinds of other words, basically kind of poking fun at the fact of why is the legislature, why do we have a bill talking about a license plate? Well, the important thing to remember is that the state legislature actually creates, changes, and issues plates because we set the law for the Department of Transportation and they implement it. It's important because we are the ones that establish the fees. We also establish and determine where that money is going to go to. That portion of that new $50 revenue to the state, and there'd be a lot of revenue coming in for that particular plate, I have a feeling. Who's going to get that money and how is it going to be spent? So that is a responsibility of the state legislature. So 100% support that. I would love to see that get across the finish line. And it would go to education, which when it comes to Second Amendment is equally important. So absolutely support it.
Thank you very much. I'm very passionate about all these things. I could talk about them all for hours, but what I want to do now is share your screen. Here we go. This is your site. People can get there by typing in your browser, Helena for House or Helena Hayes, Hayes, for Iowa, and I promise you'll navigate there. Unfortunately, we're restricted from offering website domains, either written or spoken, but this is how you'll do that. So at this point, I'd like to turn this over to you, Helena Hayes, District 88 here in Iowa, to tell us a little bit about yourself and expand on whatever you'd like us to know. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, thank you, Michael. You know, as I was thinking about what I want to speak about to your audience and your followers, I want to come from an angle that I think perhaps a lot of them may not have a perspective from, and I hope they don't, quite frankly. So I want to tell you a little story about my personal life and my childhood. When I was 4 years old, I had a bigger sister who was 5 at the time and another bigger sister who was 6 years old. And back in those days, you know what I mean? When your car died, when one of the old, station wagons or pickups died, then you just put them in the back 40 and you parked them somewhere and they just stayed there in the yard. Do you have any of that experience?
Yeah.
Michael?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
My generation. And one day in one of those abandoned vehicles, us 3 sisters were playing, and as children do, discovering and exploring, and nobody knows for sure the real story. But there was apparently a pistol in the glove compartment, and it was loaded. And by the end of that playtime, my sister, who was 6 years old, did not make it, and she died from some sort of accidental gunshot. And again, we don't really quite know what happened because a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old aren't very good witnesses in a situation like that. I don't remember a lot of the details, but what I do remember growing up is the difficulties for my parents, having lost a child in that way. And you would think that I may have grown up to be perhaps an anti-gun person and against gun violence and against guns in general because of the death and the loss of a family member in my own family. But actually, it's quite the opposite. For me personally, I've been able to separate the fact that firearms do demand respect, they demand responsibility, and they demand safety. But in principle, our Second Amendment rights, our right to keep and bear arms, cannot be superseded by our own personal experiences where we have experienced loss. And my perspective, coming from that place, is that I will always protect your listeners' right to keep and bear arms despite my family's loss. And that's what I just want to say in closing here, because I think it's really important. We need to do that. We must do that. And I fully support our Second Amendment rights. And I also support education and improving safety. And so with that, that is my story. And I just hope that you don't have a lot of listeners who understand that and want to go there, because it's a painful place. And we recently have had other experiences of that in my community. But thankfully, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain.
Thank you for that. My apologies for and my sympathy and also my empathy for that situation and your experience and your family's experiences. I have no doubt your sister's waiting on you upstairs, and you'll be reunited, as we all will when we're believers. But the reality is, beyond that, talking about some of these things can be a little bit painful, and sometimes a lot painful. And I think that it's a testament to people who are putting these civil liberties first and over some of their own emotions and their own personal reservations is the act or are the thoughts that we're really looking for in citizen legislators. IFC doesn't offer endorsements in this realm, but I'm telling you, if we did, we would be pleased to talk with people like Helena Hayes, District 88, about these things and hoist her forward, because the reality is we need people who are able to think logically like this and also have a tremendous empathy for the suffering of others, because this is real and it cannot be denied. So one of the things the Second Amendment community, I think, doesn't do as well as what we could is come alongside people and put things in place that lead to better potential outcomes, or better yet, avoid these calamities to begin with. We spoke yesterday in preparation for this a little bit about that, Helena Hayes, and I'm thankful for that conversation. Maybe that'll lead to some very fantastic places with Iowans and more people beyond as the beneficiaries. So as I zip down through your site here and take a quick look, people, and again, you can navigate to this by opening up your browser, Helena for House, Helena Hayes, and that's HELENA. And you'll be able to see her, a little bit about her, meet Helena. She's got some information here for you. Her likeness, of course, core principles. And then, of course, you can subscribe and get involved with the campaign. I have no doubt that you'd probably welcome door knockers and contributors. So if there's anything else you want to tell us, now's the time. Go right ahead.
You know, two words that I've always tried to push since I got involved in politics 4 years ago, and that is equip and inform. I've always tried to equip my voters and inform them about what's going on. So you'll see on there, you can subscribe to my newsletter. And I have been told the newsletter is too long, but that's okay, because you don't have to read it all. You pick and choose what you want, what interests you. But the biggest thing is it's delivered to your inbox and you have information and you're equipped to make decisions. So be sure to subscribe to my newsletter too.
Fantastic. That's on there, and we're able to navigate and do that real quick. That's great. All right, then. That's what we needed. We appreciate you coming on and talking about our 4 questions, sharing something about yourself that offers a little context and history. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Let's get back to our 2 screens here. All right. That's what we needed. Helena Hayes, District 88 here in Iowa, running for Iowa House. Thank you again very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. God bless you all.